I died. Right in the heart of Los Angeles, surrounded by tear gas, sirens, and the chaotic sound of footsteps scattering in every direction. It wasn't in a dream. It wasn't in my sleep. It happened while my eyes were still open. I remember the exact moment my body collapsed, my head hit the pavement, and the screams around me began to fade, as if I were slipping away from this world. But what haunted me the most wasn't death itself. It was what I realized in that moment. I wasn't the only one who died that day. Some died from losing hope. Others died from invisible fear. Many died in silence, in a country they called home, but were never truly welcomed in. Have you ever wondered what goes through the mind of an undocumented immigrant in the final moments of their life? Do they regret coming here, or do they mourn the fact that they never had a chance to prove they belonged? Maybe you think this is just another story about protests, about ICE, about politics, but it's not. This is a story about a father, a son, and a moment at the edge of life and death that exposed a truth many of us are too afraid to face. Are we truly living, or just surviving in fear? But the reason I came back, the reason I'm still here, was because of what I saw after I left my body. A vision that will change the way you see this world forever. If you've ever believed near-death experiences are just about a light at the end of the tunnel, wait until I tell you who I met on the other side.
My name is Mateo Alvarez. I'm not a social activist, I'm not a journalist, and I'm not a hero. I'm just an ordinary man with calloused hands, an old pickup truck, and one simple dream, that my daughter might go to college and live a life where no one calls her illegal. I came to America when I was 19, slipping across the border with a caravan, leaving behind my elderly mother and our adobe home in the hills of Oaxaca. Back then, I believed that if I worked hard enough, I would be accepted. But 19 years later, I was still invisible. Every morning, I stood in the Home Depot parking lot, waiting for someone to need a laborer, someone to carry, build, clean, or tear down a roof. Every time a truck pulled up, I didn't need to know who they were. All I had to hear was, "How much?" and I'd run to it like a drowning man spotting land. I used to believe that everything would be okay if I just stayed quiet and worked hard. But over time, I realized silence doesn't protect anyone. And so, on June 6th, I joined the crowd, holding up a sign and shouting words I had never dared to say out loud. When I stormed the Home Depot that day, I ran like an animal. But when I saw children being loaded into vans, I stopped. I didn't run anymore. Because if I stayed silent one more time, I knew I'd never again be able to look my daughter in the eyes. People ask me, "Why did you protest? Was it worth the risk?" I just smile, because they don't understand. I took that risk the moment I stepped foot on this land. But what I never expected was that the protest wouldn't just change the way I lived, it would change the way I die. Can you believe that collapsing in the middle of the street was the only way I could finally see what I had forgotten for 19 long years? That day, the heat was so intense that the asphalt turned sticky beneath my shoes. I arrived at Home Depot before sunrise, wearing the same faded shirt, carrying the same quiet hope I brought every morning. But instead of the usual pickups, that morning brought a fleet of unmarked white vans with dark-tinted windows, rushing in like a sudden wind and stopping like predators spotting still prey. "ICE," I heard someone shout, and then the entire lot exploded into chaos. People ran in every direction. Some fell, while others were caught. I ran on instinct, but my heart wasn't running. In a split second, my daughter's face flashed through my mind. If I got taken, who would care for her? And if I stayed silent, who would teach her the difference between surviving in fear and living for what is right? That night, I heard there was a protest downtown. I went. I didn't bring anything except a piece of cardboard with a hastily written message. "We belong here too." The crowd around me surged like a sea of fury. Some chanted in English, others shouted in Spanish. There were Mexican flags, American flags, and Palestinian flags. But above all of them was a sky heavy with tear gas and the roar of helicopters. As night fell, the air thickened. We stood on Highway 101, a road I once drove every day hauling construction materials, now turned into a front line. In front of us stood riot police with shields, helmets, and tear gas. Behind us were immigrants, students, young mothers, elderly men whose legs shook but whose eyes still burned with light. I stood among them and understood. This was no longer just a protest. This was a cry from thousands of forgotten lives. A loud explosion rang out. Something flew over my head, followed by a billow of white smoke. People screamed, scattered, and some fell. I saw a young man being dragged across the pavement, still shouting, "Justicia! Justicia!" Someone smashed a self-driving car on the roadside, flames bursting like a rage long suppressed. And I stood in the middle of it all, and suddenly I couldn't hear anything. My ears went numb. My heartbeat raced, then slowed, then stopped altogether. The next moment, I saw my body collapse. But I didn't feel pain. I felt weightless, as if the burden of a lifetime in exile had finally lifted from my shoulders. Have you ever imagined what you'd see the moment you leave your body behind? I saw it, and it was nothing like any dream you've ever had. I stood in that endless white space, not knowing how long I'd been falling, or even who I still was. And then, a scent drifted past, faint but unmistakable. The smoky smell of damp firewood, the burnt edge of popcorn, a smell you could only find in our kitchen back home in Oaxaca. I turned, and he was there. He hadn't changed at all since the last time I saw him. Salt and pepper hair, sleeves rolled up, eyes always stern, but never unloving. My father. The man who was deported when I was still a teenager. The man I thought had vanished from my life forever. I couldn't speak. Even without a body, my throat tightened. He walked toward me, not to hug me, not to touch me. He simply stood there and asked softly, "How far have you run?" I lowered my head. "Far, Papa. I thought I'd made it to the promised land, but in the end, I realized I was just surviving in fear." He nodded, just like I once did. I thought if I worked enough, endured enough, stayed quiet enough, I'd be accepted. But some things, he said, you don't get unless you dare to claim them. I looked up. His eyes held a trace of regret, but also something else, something I had never seen in them while he was alive: forgiveness. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Because you've reached the threshold," he replied. "In this place, no one is led forward unless they're ready, but no one goes back unless they're willing to face themselves." I stayed silent. And in that silence, questions I had never dared to face came rushing in. Why did I leave my mother behind? Why didn't I teach my daughter to speak Spanish? Why was I once ashamed to admit I had no papers? I thought I had been running from ICE, from America, from the past itself. But the truth is, I had been running from myself. "You can stay," my father said, his voice soft as mist. "Or you can return. But if you go back, you must remember this." I lifted my head, and though I had no body, I felt my heart tighten. What is it? Home is not where you're allowed to stand. Home is where you choose to stand for what you love. I wept. For the first time, in a place where no tears could fall, I still felt the crashing wave of a grief long buried, now breaking free. I was no longer the Mateo who bowed his head every morning waiting for work. I was no longer the Mateo who flinched at every knock on the door after midnight. I was a father to a little girl, a son to a man who had never truly left me, no matter what world we now stood in. I don't know the exact moment I chose to return. I only know that I did, and for the first time I was ready not just to go back, but to truly live. But when I opened my eyes, it wasn't light I saw first. It was my daughter's tear-filled eyes staring back at me. And in that moment, I understood that sometimes coming back isn't just survival, it's a miracle born of courage. I was falling, but no longer into an endless white void. Everything around me began to move. Images spun like a film in reverse, from the chaos of Los Angeles back to the red dirt roads of my childhood, the tin roofs creaking in the wind, and my mother's voice calling from afar, "Mateo, dinner's ready, come home." I saw myself at 18, standing beside a pickup truck, hands trembling, eyes filled with both hunger and fear. The last time I hugged my mother was, The last time I looked back at the place that raised me before stepping into a journey with no way back. I thought I was brave, but now all I saw was a boy running away. Then I saw the night I arrived in America. No flowers, no flags waving in welcome, just darkness, cold, and a lone gas station under flickering lights. In those early years, I slept in my truck, bathed in park restrooms, and survived on leftover bread from corner stores. Once, I was beaten just for standing too long outside a store without buying anything. But I endured because I believed that one day I would be acknowledged. I saw the moment I met the mother of my daughter, a strong, independent woman, an American with brown skin and a resilient heart. We loved each other with a quiet kind of love, the kind that didn't need promises. But when she found out I was undocumented, she walked away, silently, leaving our daughter in my care. No bitterness, no blame. Back then, I was angry at her, angry at myself, angry at the world. But now, all I feel is gratitude. Gratitude that she trusted me enough to believe I could be a father. I saw myself holding my daughter for the first time, her tiny hands, her face so eerily similar to mine. I made a promise that day that she would never grow up in fear the way I had. But then I saw another version of me, years later, hanging up the phone when she asked, "Dad, why didn't you come to parent-teacher night?" I told her I was busy, but the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid someone would ask, "Who are you? Do you have papers?" I thought I was protecting her, but in that moment, I saw it clearly. I was teaching her to be afraid.
Then I saw the morning of June 6th. I was standing in the Home Depot parking lot, gripping a crumpled piece of paper in my hand. My daughter just got accepted to college. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but no one had time to listen to a nameless laborer tell his story. And then came the smoke, the explosion, the highway, the fire, the moment I collapsed. I had lived in this country for nearly 20 years, but it wasn't until I fell that I truly saw how deeply I had existed in every single moment, every choice, every failure, every quiet triumph. And all of it, whether painful or beautiful, was a part of me I could not deny. But there was one thing memory had never shown me, the look in my daughter's eyes when she thought I was gone. And that look, that was the one thing I could not leave behind. I no longer knew where I was. No more white light, no more swirling memories. Everything was still, as if the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting. In front of me were two paths, no signs, no voices, only a feeling. One offered rest, the other return. My father was still there, the same gentle gaze, the same upright stance he had when he was a mason back in our village. He didn't push. He just looked at me with eyes that made me feel small and deeply loved. I asked him, barely above a whisper, "If I go back, will anything be different?" He smiled. "No, you still won't have papers. You'll still be poor. You'll still have to fight. But this time, you'll know who you are." I turned away. I thought of my daughter. I saw her standing beside my hospital bed, her tiny hand holding mine, her eyes dry, not from lack of pain, but from tears already spent. I saw the look of a child raised in a world that half embraced, half doubted her, yet never stopped believing her father was a good man. I saw her future, not in skyscrapers or titles, but in the day someone asks her, "Who is your father?" And she answers, without hesitation, "The man who didn't give up." I saw the protesters I once stood with, held hands with, and shouted with into the night. Maybe we didn't change the laws. Maybe we didn't stop ICE. Maybe we didn't silence the guns. But we stood. And sometimes that's everything. And then I didn't choose. I didn't need to. The decision was already in my blood, in my breath, in every step I had ever taken. I didn't return because I feared death. I returned because I had never truly lived. I came back because my daughter needed a father willing to be fully present. I came back because the past needs to be faced, not hidden. I came back because, for the first time, I knew I belonged here. And when I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw wasn't the hospital or the lights, it was life itself,
raw, unforgiving, fierce, and it was waiting for me to begin again. I opened my eyes. There was no thunder, no choir of angels, no glorious beam of light like in the movies, just the sound of a ventilator, the squeak of rubber soles sliding across the hospital floor, and a harsh white light shining directly into my face. But I knew I was alive. I had come back. My mouth was dry. My body felt like it was pinned beneath a mountain. I couldn't speak. But then I heard a voice whispering in my ear, trembling, broken, not from fear, but from the fragile hope that had just become real. "Dad, can you hear me?" It was her, my daughter. I couldn't answer, but tears streamed from my eyes, not tears of pain, but the tears of someone who had crossed through death to rediscover what he had once taken for granted, being near the one he loves. I turned my head slowly. I saw her sitting at the edge of my bed, both hands wrapped tightly around mine, her head bowed, hair messy, and her eyes, those eyes, for the first time in years, held no fear, only trust. The door swung open. A nurse entered. Behind her stood a man in an IC uniform. I saw his eyes flick down to the folder in his hands. I knew this wasn't over. Tomorrow I could be deported. Tonight might be my last in my daughter's arms. But that no longer terrified me the way it once did, because I was no longer the Mateo from yesterday. I was the man who died on a Los Angeles highway and chose to return, not to prove anything to America, but to prove something to myself. I squeezed my daughter's hand, a small gesture, but a loud declaration. I will not give up. No matter what lies ahead, whether it's stone, fire, or razor wire, I will walk it. Because some things can never be deported: memory, love, and the longing to belong. I died once, and now I know, from this moment on, every breath will be a living statement, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel invisible. But there's one last thing I need to say, and it's not about me. It's about all of us, about a truth that no policy, no border wall, no hate-filled slogan can ever erase. I died in the middle of a protest. But the thing I regret the most wasn't dying. It was the way I once lived, as if I didn't deserve to be here, as if working hard enough, bowing low enough, and staying quiet enough would finally make me acceptable. But no one can truly live while carrying the weight of being temporary. And no one can truly love a country that keeps pushing them to its margins. I'm not telling this story to be pitied. I don't need anyone to call me brave. I just want you, if you're watching this, to ask yourself, how are we defining who belongs? Is it by paperwork, by accent, by skin color, or by what someone is willing to sacrifice to protect this place? I used to believe that home was where you were born, but I was wrong. Home is where you choose to stand, even when the world tells you that you have no right to. Home is where, when you fall, there's still a hand that reaches for you, whether it's from a stranger or the small hand of your daughter. If one day you come across someone silent for too long, know that they are not invisible. They just haven't been heard. And if you see an immigrant standing in a crowd of protesters, don't rush to judge. Maybe, like me, they're just trying to show their child that silence is no longer a way to survive. I died. I came back. And I know now no wall is taller than fear. No document is more valuable than courage. And no one is an outsider when the pain is real, when the blood is real, when the longing to live fully is real. Don't wait until you're near death to ask yourself, have I truly lived? Ask now, while you still have breath. Because I'm living proof that even a nameless man can rewrite his story not with power, but with one simple choice: to rise.